could well get lively, as it has done today with Danny Murphy. Do you like Danny?
But you don't even know that. What you're doing is you're taking a narrative.
Of course he doesn't.
Of course he doesn't.
Of course he doesn't.
Are you honestly telling us that?
Feels like a very strident set of offences, and maybe that's the world we're in now. An incredibly unfortunate and probably unjust set of circumstances. I'm not taking a single penny. In fact, I want to be paid on the way out.
Danny, who's going to take first prize at the Club World Cup? First of all, this man to my left, Simon and I were talking the other day about it. From my point of view, it's grown on me. And I've now got a real curiosity as to who's going to end up at the business end of this tournament. Have you?
No, I haven't watched any.
What?
You know how much I love my football, but no, I just can't get into it.
Why?
Well, because it's
you haven't watched any of it.
Well, watching games with half-empty stadiums is tedious anyway. It's boiling hot. The tempo's not great, apart from the South American teams who are A, used to playing in it, and B, in the middle of their season. So that in itself makes it somewhat ridiculous. You've got teams playing who are in the middle of the season. You've got groups of players from Europe who are having a bit of a jolly up because they've got to be there, don't really want to be there.
If Liverpool were in it, you'd be watching it.
Only if the new players were playing, so have a look at them. But no, I've got no interest. I don't think the players who are there from Europe are particularly... I mean, Atletico Madrid going out, they didn't look too bothered, did they? I mean, for me, it's not drawn me in at all. And
so you give the tournament no value?
No.
Martin Samuel, in his column, this is not the meaningless bauble many condescendingly claim it is. On July the 13th, one club, possibly European, maybe not, will be declared world champions.
So they're the best team in the world, are they? Chelsea.
Well, that's what it means.
Chelsea sneaked in fifth in the Premier League, so they'll be crowned the best team in the world. Do me a favour.
When Chelsea won the Champions League, they were considered the best team in Europe.
But we all know the Champions League's got more credentials and more at the moment.
We don't, because what we've done, we've decided. And it's interesting, I don't know what Martin Samuel's original position was, but you'll start to see the narrative change, because it has been condescendingly dumped upon. Everyone's ridiculed it, parodied it, couldn't get broadcast deals, couldn't do this, couldn't do that, couldn't do the other. And now Samuel is leading the charge to say, hold on a second here. You know, this is not quite what people are portraying it to be. It's an inaugural tournament. It's got 32 teams. It's got big hitters in there.
But the teams aren't there through meritocracy.
Well, a lot of them are.
Well, what, based on whose agenda?
Well, okay.
The governing body creating an agenda to get teams.
But you don't even know
want.
that. What you're doing is you're taking a narrative. How many of the teams do you think have not qualified through merit if you're going to make that statement?
Well, none of them.
Don't be so absurd.
Not really.
Well, they've won their leagues.
Chelsea won the league, did they?
No, Chelsea were the last European champions, but Man City won the league for the qualification criteria that got them into this year's tournament.
Look,
Chelsea and Manchester City are Champions League winners.
Yeah, but they're not there for anything other than money.
Yeah, but every competition's about money. The whole idea.
No, it's about if you win the Champions League or the Premier League. Yes, you get money, but it's Danny, historical. You're remembered forever because you won it. Nobody's going to care or remember who wins this tournament.
Know? When the Champions League changed from the European Cup,
it was still a huge trophy.
When the Europa League has been configured, people will take their own particular relevance in that. You've got a new tournament. I'm not necessarily for or against it, and I'm certainly not for Gianni Infantino, because I'm not an admirer of his, and I'm not an admirer of that opaque organisation. But to just take a great big dump on it from a height without really understanding what you're talking about.
Well, I do understand it because I'm looking at it from a footballing perspective.
But you don't know. Football. If you're telling me,
well, I know that
statistically 70% of the teams in there are not in merit, but you can't say that. You're picking out individual instances.
You're saying on merit based on somebody's criteria who've made it up for themselves.
But a criteria to qualify for any tournament is based on someone else's criteria.
Liverpool
have just won the league. And they won it, under Klopp 2 or 3 years ago.
So the qualification for the inaugural tournament, which had to be planned a year out, right?
Right, so Chelsea above Liverpool, why?
Because they were the last champions of Europe in England.
Right, okay.
Besides Manchester City, right? So the reality... Because Man City can't go in twice, you silly
No, I know, but...
Right?
So they're just manipulating it to suit their needs.
No, they didn't.
Well, when it comes to merit, are Tottenham Champions League qualifiers on merit? They finished 17th.
Yeah, but we're talking. You're asking me about a one-off tournament as a spectator. Has it engrossed me? Does it engage me?
Been talking about the prospect of the tournament, the Club World Cup being staged here in England in future years. Would you buy into that?
Let's look at it a different way.
Would you buy into that?
What was the question? Sorry.
Martin Samuel is saying maybe in the next few years we'll see a Club World Cup such as this being staged here, hosted by England. Maybe. Would you buy into that?
Things can grow on you, but at the moment it's not. You ask me the question, I give you a direct answer.
The important thing is to have an open mind and then to assess it.
It is open, and I looked at snippets of it, and I've got no interest.
But you said you've not watched any of it.
Well, I've seen snippets, highlights, but I've watched nothing live.
We've seen PSG that were a powerhouse going into this tournament. That have won most of the games, getting beaten by Botafogo. Yeah. And the reaction as a result of it, because the Brazilian teams are doing well. We've seen some of the other.
You've also got what? What
do you mean what?
PSG have just shown they're the best team in Europe by playing consistently well for a period of time.
And they've played against the Brazilian side.
Yes, who are in the middle of their season.
Right.
The PSG boys are probably protecting themselves, ready to have a break and then start a new season.
But you don't know that.
I do, because I've played the game.
Well, okay.
You don't go and play in 90-degree temperatures for a tournament you've never played in, where you're mixing the team up. They're not playing their best team.
I don't know who they're playing. Do you? Have you seen the selections?
Yeah.
You know what they're playing.
So they're mixing it up.
Right, so they're rotating for a tournament like you would, right? And ultimately PSG and their chairman came onto the show and said, the next thing we want to win.
Of course he's going to say that.
Well, yeah, but
you know what people say.
But he's a standard bearer that enforces. I would imagine Luis Enrique wants to be the first winner of the inaugural FIFA World Club Championship because it will have some precedence.
I think he wouldn't care less.
Well, okay, but that's
surely
but that's
not.
Let me ask you a question.
Closed mind point of view. You're better than that.
If Chelsea win it,
yeah,
right, temporarily, there's going to be some kudos for Maresca and the boys, right?
Of course.
If they lose 3 out of the first 5 games, you think any Chelsea fans are going to go, we've got to give them time, we just won that World Club Cup? Of course they're not.
Well, but
I think it would change the perception of Chelsea and change the perception of Maresca.
For the Chelsea fans.
If Chelsea win it, does he become the best club manager in the world?
Of course he doesn't.
Of course he doesn't.
Of course he doesn't.
Well, they're the best club in the world.
Hold on, what? And 3 months ago, before they won that,
in the tournaments.
3 months ago, before they qualified for the Champions League.
So what does it give you, Simon, to the winner? What does the winner get?
Money.
It gives you a trophy and it gives you money, and they're one and the same thing because we live in a participation sport now. It's a massive thing to get 5th in the Premier League or 4th in the Premier League, play in the Champions League, even if you don't win it.
But the headline news is best club in the world.
Yeah, but that's true.
Chelsea,
but that's
best club in the world if it's Manchester City. Best club in the world if it's PSG.
But Botafogo win it, they're the best team in the world.
You win the title.
But we know that
for the time being,
they're the best club in this tournament, right? So if Arsenal had gone on to win the Champions League, would they have been the best team in the tournament? By the nature of the event, yes, they would have been the best club in Europe, possibly not. Yeah. But what we're talking about is the value of the tournament.
If Liverpool were in it and won it, would they be the best club in the world?
It wouldn't change. My opinion of the best teams in Europe or the world doesn't change based on this tournament, where you've got teams playing. Forget even the Heat. Where you're playing against each other, where some are at the end of the season and they're not in the same place, the ones in the middle of the season.
What makes you the best club in the world? Incidentally, Chelsea fan Mark, Jim, Danny Murphy, typical rose-spectacled scouse idiot. You're not. That was a bit harsh.
Well, he's probably somebody who'll be there at Stamford Bridge moaning about Maresca if they lose the first 2 home games, won't he?
Well, they'll moan about him whether he
wins it or not.
Oh,
correct. There's my point.
What makes you the best club in the world? We're trying to find out
consistently winning
who can be called the best club in the world.
Well, the teams that consistently win the biggest trophies you can win. So Real Madrid have always classed as that because they constantly dominate the Champions.
PSG apparently put out their strongest side to beat Seattle. FYI.
I'd have to see.
So you would say that it's got to be based over the last couple of decades or even longer. Who's recognised to be the best
it depends
club in the world?
It depends on you're having a conversation with. You can
Real Madrid might be the most iconic, but if they lose the final of this competition, it doesn't make them the best club in the world.
In the last 10 years,
it makes their opponent the best club in the world.
In the last 10 years, you could argue Real Madrid have been the best team in Europe because they've won most Champions League. It's quite simple.
Yeah.
Manchester City have been the best club in it, the best team in England because they've won the most Premier League. It's really not difficult. Best team in the world, then you bring in South American teams into it. It's nonsensical argument. You can never win.
Let's put it out there. Danny, you've absolutely detonated the show at this stage, so let's do it. If Chelsea win it, does that make you, in the eyes of you Chelsea fans, the best club in the world?
If
Manchester City win it and you win the Club World Cup, are you the best that the world can offer right now?
It's a bit like the
Would you recognise yourselves as the best club? You might want to give us a call on that.
Well, if Tottenham beat
Liverpool were in it and Liverpool won it, you bet Danny would be saying they're the best club in the world.
The Super Cup's a one-off game.
But it's like the playoffs, Danny. If you finish third in the league with 92 points and someone finishes 6th and gets into playoffs, gets 72 points, the team that finished third were the third best team in the league, but it didn't get promoted. But the competition enabled a team that finished 6th. So you have to consider it in the rounds. So if you go and play in the FIFA World Cup Championships and you win the FIFA World Cup, then it has value. I'm not going with the value that he's suggesting, but you're saying it's valueless.
To me.
But it's a silly
There's no
analysis.
value.
But I don't think the Chelsea players or the Man City players
They will when they get their bonuses.
will feel a great sense of satisfaction lifting that.
Of course they will.
If they win it, watch the celebrations.
If they listen to plums like you in the media saying it's of no value, then they might do that. But if people build up to...
Simon, you're looking at it from one perspective. I'm being asked to look at it from a football
Yeah, but you're looking
player.
from a closed mind point of view.
No, from a player's
But Danny,
perspective.
from a player's point of view, and I'm trying to get to a break, but if you were playing for a club at the Club World Championship at the moment in the US, you get to the final and you win it.
Yeah.
Infantino puts your winner's medal over your shoulders.
Yeah.
You look at him and
Say
think,
thank you.
this is valueless. That's what you're saying.
much.
But he wouldn't. He's being argumentative. If this was being...
Yeah, are you honestly telling us that?
Well,
This medal has no value.
When we won the Super Cup against Bayern for Liverpool, nobody really cared.
If the media had been... If we had wall-to-wall World Club Championships, if this was on mainstream broadcasters and the media had gone, what a tournament, then people would be thinking differently. But because it's been universally dumped on from a great height about what it is and what it isn't, and nobody wants to watch it,
It's like a pre-season
then it
tournament.
becomes centred in his mind, so he's now got prejudicial bias towards it, so he's not going to change his mind, and when he starts watching games he'll reluctantly start to move away from the fact that it isn't worth watching.
Answer me this honestly in one sentence. If Liverpool were in this, would you look at this differently?
No.
One word will do. Obviously, you have been in communication with John Textor. It's not often we'd lead the show with a story from the French Ligue 1, but this particular tale is very much intertwined with the Premier League, Crystal Palace and the French club Lyon, all due to the ownership of the American John Textor. Overnight, Lyon relegated to Ligue 2 due to financial issues which they were deemed not to have satisfied. They were threatened with this in November. If they didn't sort it out, they might hit problems. Well, they have hit problems and they've been relegated. Lyon are appealing it. This comes at a time when Textor's involvement in both Lyon and Palace has caused issues with UEFA regarding multi-club ownership as something they need to look at. The result has seen Palace now threatened with demotion from the Europa League. So to help to avoid this, in the last few days, Textor has sold his shares in Palace, but that might not be enough, as it came after UEFA's deadline for participation in the Europa League. Lyon's relegation has now really muddied the waters, as it remains unclear whether their Europa League qualification is now null and void. Simon, I mean, does this make the Palace-Lyon Europa League situation any more clearer, or does it add an extra layer of confusion?
Well, again, from the outset, I've always said, and I think Stefan Borson, who came in the other day, said before Textor even sold his shares that we believe that Palace would be able to navigate their way through this situation, and that it would be an incredibly unfortunate and probably unjust set of circumstances that enabled them not to play in this competition. And even more so if Textor has divested himself of the shares that he's got and taken a haircut to do it, which he has done.
But that's after that deadline, isn't it? March
But there are lots made of these deadlines, but these deadlines were changed a year ago from being June the 1st down to March the 1st. There was a lot of noise made about Marinakis doing it at Nottingham Forest and putting himself in a blind trust, but he didn't do it in time. He did that in April. And Forest were expecting to be able to overcome the barriers to entry, because when we talked about Forest and Marinakis putting himself into a blind trust, which by the way is ludicrous, because if Nottingham Forest needed money, who are they going to go to? They're going to go to Marinakis. So the fact his shares are in blind trust and he no longer has decisive control is a load of old cobblers.
But we're on the 25th of June. We're almost out of June.
Yeah.
Qualification for the Europa League gets underway fairly soon, and it's totally up in the air regards Palace's involvement and Lyon's involvement.
Well, it is as far as transparency is concerned. As far as those that may be making the decision and those that are going to be the recipients of the decision, maybe they have a clearer view of it.
Right.
And you have to look at this in the rounds. A lot of adverse publicity. I don't understand the French situation in terms of what's happened at Lyon, in terms of what the PSL governance over there, if there is indeed any, because not only are they having to comply with the obligations of their own league, they'll have to comply with the UEFA. And I don't think there's been any indication that they weren't going to be accepted into the Europa League, and Europa League has some governance issues around it. So the fact that Lyon were able to potentially play in the Europa League, and UEFA's regulations seem to be tighter than most other football domestic regulations. So It's very curious to see the peculiarities of why Lyon, they're going to appeal, and if you read the text from Lyon, from their directors and from Textor, which is they're absolutely gobsmacked this decision has been made, you must expect potentially a robust appeal.
Defence.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, gobsmacked they may be, Simon, but, this is the current state of affairs. They're looking at football in Ligue 2 next season.
Yeah.
Their participation in the Europa League is now seriously in doubt, as is Palace's, because Textor has sold his shares in Palace, as I said. I think something that was confirmed to you the other day by him.
Well, it's true, yeah.
To your man that owns the New York Jets.
And he expects, and John expects the outcome to be that Palace's position is maintained in Europe.
Well, possibly, but it came after UEFA's deadline for participation in the Europa League. That said, Julien Laurent, who is an expert on all things French football, he gave his reaction last night to the news that was just in at that time that Lyon were relegated.
John Textor happened. And I mean, I don't know how Crystal Palace fans feel about him, but he almost cost them a place in the Europa League next season. But Lyon fans want him out of their club because since he took over, Jean-Michel Aulas, who is the historical owner and president of that club, who did so many great things between 87 and 2019, 1987 and 2019, when he sold the club to John Textor. Lyon were a powerhouse, not just in French football, but in European football as well, in Champions League. But since John Textor arrived and took over that club, it's been an absolute disgrace the way he ran that club to the ground, really, because to the point that being relegated now in the second division because your debts are so high and you can't actually offer a proper plan.
So Julien, very outspoken about Textor's involvement and his time at Olympique Lyon.
But in defence of John Textor, which I have no reason to be, this is not true.
What's not true?
John Textor gave Crystal Palace £180 million, which Steve Parish and the other directors put in their pockets and used to fund the football club through COVID. Those are facts. It was Steve Parish has ran this football club. He has decisive influence over it. The testification in front of UEFA was to prove that Parish has decisive control. It was Parish's responsibility to say to Textor in March, we are in the FA Cup, we could qualify for Europe, we need to look at this investment. They took this investment. The shareholders of Crystal Palace, which are Parish, Harris and Blitzer, took the money from Textor, sold in the shares, and they retain the control, so it's upon them. Now, if Textor sat there like a dog in a manger going, I refuse to do that, then we can say it's Textor. Julien Laurent does not know that, so he cannot make the observation about Crystal Palace.
No, but he's talking about the Lyon situation.
Right, so let's go to the Lyon situation. What is it they're being
sanctioned? Can you deny the fact that Textor, and I know you're not in any way putting up a defence for him,
shill,
but to me, the simple fact of the matter is, as Julien said, Textor has been sitting at the top of a French club, which is a proud French club and a force in French football, which has just been relegated to Ligue 2 because of serious financial irregularities.
But what is the sanctions? Because in this conversation, and I don't like to fly blind, I like to try and be the smartest person in the room with information.
Sure.
But the reality of it is I don't know what they're being sanctioned for. Are they being sanctioned for not paying wages? Are they being sanctioned for illicit payments?
Huge debt. Because of serious financial issues.
Okay, so let's get it right then.
So it's 175 million.
If you're going to sanction someone for debt, why haven't Manchester United been sanctioned for debt? Why a whole raft of clubs being sanctioned for debt?
I don't know, but those appear to be the rules in France.
I assume that the rules in France are more strident and more stringent. So for Julien to be going off at the mouth about what's happening in England, which he doesn't have any visibility of, he should park it up, and someone should explain exactly what the governance is around the French authorities sanctioning somebody that doesn't appear to have been sanctioned by UEFA. And I would expect UEFA's domestic or policies around financial regulations to be quite strident, because we've seen it. We've seen Real Madrid have to sell their training ground to comply with it. We've seen other clubs being sanctioned under UEFA regulations, including Man City. So what is it they're being sanctioned for? And then you and I can have a strident conversation about whether John Textor is a devil incarnate.
I mean, the simple fact of the matter is they've been relegated.
Indeed.
Says they did an audit of their finances, and if they'd be officially triggered, the relegation would be officially triggered if Lyon failed to satisfactorily improve their financial situation before the end of the season. They've done it after because they've sold a couple of players.
So, in all things being equal, does that, in real terms, and it feels like I'm defending Textor, what I'm trying to do is get a framework of a conversation, right? But when Nottingham Forest sold Brennan Johnson, they held off the sale of Brennan Johnson to get more dough for him, and it triggered a consequence, which was points.
You're right.
In this instance, Lyon have sold a player that perhaps rectified the financial situation, and it's triggered a relegation. Now, I don't know about you, but that feels like a very strident set of offences, and maybe that's the world we're in now. Maybe financial governance is so important, because ultimately, that's not going to say, if Lyon are in such a bleeding mess, they're going to be an even bigger bleeding mess now, aren't they? Because they're out of the French league, which albeit
and they've sold their best players.
So how's that helping anybody? So
I mean, they are appealing. So that is going to kick it into the long grass further, and it's going to take time.
I imagine they are.
But the fact of the matter is, they've had a fire sale with Maxence Quadri going to Como and Ryan Cherky going to Manchester City.
But
the key players.
But I'll ask you a question again. What we normally see when a club's in absolute disarray is people don't get paid. I'm not hearing that about Lyon. I'm not hearing the players are not being paid and all this sort of stuff. So clearly they're meeting some sort of obligations, because we sit in this country, we see Sheffield Wednesday not paying their wages. We see Reading, we see other people in
That's
leagues,
a fair point.
and all of a sudden they get sanctioned because they're not able to meet the obligations. And that gives you, these guys have got debt, and they seem to be able to pay their way.
But they're being threatened with the relegation before the end of the season to try and raise the funds or eat into that debt, if you like, by selling players. They couldn't do it. The window was closed.
Exactly one of the reasons.
We'll try and put a bit more meat in the bones of this as we go along this morning. But certainly, there is a situation which has now developed, and a serious one, for the two clubs, Olympique Lyon and in the background Crystal Palace. And in the middle of all of this, John Textor. Looking forward to you locking horns, engaging
Kyrgios,
with former tennis star Nick
I'm
Kyrgios.
trying to rack my mind as to what I've said about him, knowing full well that you are going to play it out in front of him. I think I was critical. I think I was critical of his observations about Tsitsipas. I think I was critical of his observations about crowd behaviour.
Yeah.
I think I was critical of his observations about the tour that Djokovic put forward. And I think I've said that he's an outstanding player and should concentrate more on his game rather than giving other people advice. So no doubt all of that will be played out in front of him.
It will be. You made a note of all of that. Producer Luke, thumbs up. Thumbs up through the glass. It's going to be lively, Nick Kyrgios.
They won't play the good things I've said about him.
Do you like the guy?
I like aspects of him. I like him. I think he's a remarkable tennis player that's not fulfilled his potential and should have won tournaments.
Is he packed in now?
I don't think he's packed it in, but I don't think he's operating at the level that he was, because look at his age. But he is such a prodigious talent, and for not to have won the things that talent.
Yeah.
And I like the fact he's plain speaking, and with it comes things that people will say that you don't agree with.
Right. Well, Nick Kyrgios will be live with Simon and myself tomorrow morning, and that could well get lively, as it has done today with Danny Murphy. Do you like Danny?
Very much.
Yeah, me too. Danny, here's the thing. At the start of the week, we saw Alejandro Garnacho, a post that he put out on social media, and this was himself. Did you see it? Yeah. He was wearing an Aston Villa shirt, and as Simon said, he was walking over to, what was it, a Bugatti or something?
A Lamborghini and a Ferrari. I was just conceptualising the world that these kids live in, that no one can relate to. A young kid, 20 years of age, and look at his world. His world is, I'm on holiday getting paid £250,000 a week, and my world is rocking in front of £1 million of cars, and then we got to relate to all the things they do.
Yeah.
Or the world has got to relate to.
And while he was doing that, Marcus Rashford was being interviewed by a Spanish YouTuber about talking about his ambition to play with the likes of Lamine Yamal at Barcelona next season. Do you think there's always going to be a club out there willing to overlook what these guys may or may not get up to off the field and take them for their on-pitch ability?
Pretty much, if the finances are right. And United are that desperate to get rid. I mean, Garnacho's a younger talent, and someone will feel like they can rein him in a little bit, because he's got a lot about him on the pitch. I like him football wise. I find it's a bit strange trying to comprehend some of the things I see and players doing, because it was just so normal for me as a young lad when I went to Liverpool to be discreet to a degree and make sure other people were always keeping you in your place. There was no opportunity to be that way. You know, the thought of putting on another team's shirt.
You'd never have done it.
I mean, God forbid. It just wouldn't enter your head. But maybe that's something to do with role models, or I don't know. I walked into an environment, it wasn't perfect at Liverpool. The discipline had gone a little bit in some respects. But in terms of how you act and how... You know, I remember, I've told this story before, but I remember months in, I was in a little Fiat I'd had.
Robbie Fowler.
And Robbie said to me, well, you can treat yourself to a... And I was thinking, oh, okay. You know, but I didn't want to go... And it was just how we were taught, and how you didn't want to become that person where people think you're above your station. Even like the colour of your boots. Or wearing leggings in the winter when it was freezing cold and snowing, and you had the nerve to put leggings on because the people were doing it, and Ronnie Moran would go, Get yourself in. Take
So
them
today, do you look at that picture of Garnacho? Can you still not get your head around it? He's wearing a Villa shirt and he's in amongst some of the most expensive sports cars you could ever imagine.
I don't.
And Rashford's name's on the back of his shirt.
I don't dislike him for it. I sympathise with him because I don't think he's got good people around him, and that's a big problem for young footballers.
Do you need to sympathise with him? He's got a few quid now.
Well, maybe not sympathise, the wrong word. I
empathise.
Empathise a little bit, yeah, because when you become really wealthy and famous, whatever level, you're going to make mistakes. And you do learn from them, hopefully, but you need some good people around you, keep you in check a bit, guide you through. And if he's only got a lot of people around him telling him how wonderful he is and how amazing you are, you tend to start believing it.
Would you, as an owner, tend to veer off in terms of interest in someone like Garnacho because of what you've heard and because of what you see about a lad like that?
Degrees of scale, isn't it? We're talking about two Man United players, so it's no surprise that the culture of Man United is allowing this to maintain itself. I had players, not with a profile, but we had players that did things that were silly, and I really concentrated in mind whether it was Clinton Morrison or certain other young players that were perceived to be young starlets, and they got told in no uncertain terms.
By you?
Yeah, they got told.
What did you tell them?
To straighten up and fly right. And don't miss the opportunities in front of you. You have a responsibility to represent this football club to the highest standard, and if you don't, I'll wring your neck.
And that's so much what you need. The other problem for these two lads, well, especially Garnacho, is he's being compared. If you think of United's success and that brilliant crop of young players, superstars, who were humble, spoke well, kept themselves under the radar because they had Fergie on them all the time. I know Beckham, as he got bigger and bigger, and then Fergie went enough. But most of them, when you think of Scholesy, Nicky Butt, when you think of Phil and Gary Neville, when you think of all of those lads, even Giggsy, who was a superstar, you just wouldn't see these things. Do you know, I remember Giggsy driving around, I saw him in Manchester once in a little Clio. And he was one of the best young players in Europe. You know, I don't know. Maybe it's time. Maybe it's evolution of football with the money involved. But I do think it doesn't matter what era you're in. If you haven't got good people around you and you just got sycophants and people who want to just blow smoke and take off you,
profit off you,
you're in a world of trouble.
Yeah. I mean, I remember
the only thing we got
Kanté at Chelsea. When he was at Chelsea, he was just driving a Mini.
I know. Well, the saving grace at the moment, when you watch Garnacho, even though he's had a poor season compared to the one he had before, he is young. That happens. One thing with him I don't see really is a decrease ever in his work ethic on the pitch. The quality you can question, or his finishing or end product, which hasn't been great this season.
But he works hard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's got that fire in his belly, and someone will take him because of that.
What do you think is the upshot for both of them? Garnacho being spoken about in terms of a possible move to Chelsea.
He'll have options.
Fenerbahce. Don't know about that, but he'd end up with Mourinho if he goes to Fenerbahce. Barcelona said to be preparing a loan bid for Marcus Rashford.
Don't see that.
Can you see Barcelona doing that?
Why would you pay 200 or 300 grand a week for a player who's not going to be in the 11?
Because it depends what you'd want to do to supplement your squad during the course of a season, and you offset it against a transfer fee, won't you? If you've got to pay a loan fee, I mean, I think it's puff and stuff by his guys being put out there to increase the value in other people's minds of Marcus Rashford, because Marcus Rashford seems to be the one indexing himself to Barcelona rather than Barcelona indexing themselves to him. He's the one that keeps on saying, "I'd like to play in Barcelona. I'd like to play with the young kid at Barcelona." I'm sure they'd be delighted with the influence that you'd be able to have on that young kid, given the standards he's set right now and the standards you don't set right now, Marcus.
Right.
I think the big challenge is how do you square the Garnacho one will take care of itself. Someone will buy him.
I think so.
And it's all profit in that as well. The situation with Rashford, which has all profit attached to it as well, is that someone's going to have to take a view on the fact they want some money for him, and no one's going to take both. No one's going to take 40, 50 million quid on Rashford and a £300,000 wage bill.
No.
Someone will pay 30, 40 million quid for him and pay him 150 grand a week, but they won't pay him £3. So if he wants to play for England next summer, if he does, and if he wants to continue to find a way to play his football, given the fact he seems completely out on the radar now of Man United, it doesn't seem that he's going to come back into the mix.
No.
It's the curious thing is how they're going to create this. And there's going to have to be some creative thinking, and someone's going to have to take a view. And I'm not sure that Man United are readily of the mindset to take a view. So the player's going to have to take some, because the player's attitude will inevitably be, and I hope I'm wrong, I'm not taking a single penny. In fact, I want to be paid on the way out. That'll be his attitude. So
I hope you're wrong with that as well.
So do I. Because if he wants to play, he has to take. He is the reason why. The reasons why Marcus Rashford finds him in a position on the outs is not because of anybody else. It's because of Marcus and his outlook and his attitude. And then the reasons why we talk to Man United fans, or have done previously, and I don't know a Man United fan that's come on this station recently over the last 12 months and had a good word to say about Marcus Rashford.
No.
In fact, they've been really extreme about
outspoken about
rid.
The only thing he's got in his armour is because of his age, really.
Yeah,
and his value decreasing.
Yeah.
A loan wouldn't suit United.
Do you think on both of them, Danny?
Anyway, they don't want to. They want to sell him.
Definitely, I would have thought you'd think yes with Garnacho. I don't know on Rashford. Do you think we're still to see the best of both of them?
I think we've seen what Rashford's capable of. That's his best. That season he had. That's the best he can be. Can he reach that again is a question mark.
Right.
He's going to need a really strong manager who takes him in and finds a perfect role for him in the team and gives him the freedom to be that person. We certainly haven't seen the best of Garnacho, no.
Okay.
He's got a good chance if he can cut out the nonsense.
Yeah. That is the latest. Maybe Chelsea, Fenerbahce looking at Garnacho. Marcus Rashford could well be that he ends up at Barcelona. But there's a bit more talking to be done yet. And as Simon rightly says, it may well be he'll need to take a trim around that £350,000 a week salary that he is on. It's Jim White, Simon Jordan, Danny Murphy. It's Wednesday lunchtime and we're live on talkSPORT with Selco, where the trade goes.